We are live for the first watch-along session for the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast Scrum Master Summit 2022. We'll start watching in a second. We'll go and watch Joshua Kerievsky's keynote, which is one of the keynotes that is live today. For those of you who want to get all of the content, you can go to scrummastersummit.org and find all of the content there. In a minute, we will be watching the Scrum Master Summit keynote with Joshua Kerievsky. I'm just setting that up now to make sure that we get access to everything. You can ask questions on the chat, and feel free to ask questions. That's one of the ways in which we can interactively watch this keynote. Today I'm going to focus on the Joshua Kerievsky keynote, which is, I believe, one of the key notes that we should be watching in the Scrum Master Summit. There's plenty of other keynotes as well, so we'll definitely be looking at other keynotes during the rest of the week. So feel free to go and check out the full Scrum Master Summit schedule at scrummastersummit.org. But now, let me just start the keynote, and we'll start sharing it in a second. So let me just get this ready for you. And we will start watching shortly. All right, so here we go. I'll just share that for you. And now that it's loading, let's listen. So welcome Scrum Masters and Agilists from all over the world. My name is Vasco Duarte, and I'm hosting this keynote with our awesome keynote speaker, Joshua Kerievsky, who will be talking to us about all of the lessons he's collected in his latest book, Joy of Agility. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you so much for having me, Vasco.
All right, it looks like we had a bit of a glitch, and we'll recover from that now. This is how live sessions go. They kind of glitch out on us sometimes, so let me just restart the keynote playing, and we'll get there in a second. So here we go again.
For having me, Vasco. A pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure, and I think a reason to be proud to have you here as a keynote speaker. Joshua is the founder of the Modern Agile movement. He also started his own business a long time ago. We'll be talking about business quite a lot today. And he's, of course, the author of the new book, Joy of Agility. For those of you interested in checking out other sessions related to business and how Agile can be applied to business and how Scrum Masters can help the businesses that they work with, check out the keynote by Jerry Starsia, where we explore the need for Scrum Masters to be part of all of those businesses conversations that lead to and sometimes even cause a decision to pivot. Pivoting is a very important aspect in the lean startup approach to product development, but it's also the core of what Agile is about, right? Like, after all, we are embracing change over following a plan. So check out all the keynotes at scrummastersummit.org. But now, diving again into business, we're going to dive into the joy of agility with Joshua. So Josh, we'll talk about the book and all of those, the 6 mantras and the insights you've collected in the book a bit later. But let me start first, and because I think we must always lead by example, and I know you do every day, I'd like you to tell us a bit more about how you started your own business and how it reflects what you talk about in the book, The Joy of Agility.
Oh, thank you. Great question. Yeah, so I worked on Wall Street when I first started out. I was very young. I was like 19 years old, in between my sophomore and junior year at university, and I ended up getting a job at a bank on Wall Street. And after working there, I learned a heck of a lot over about 6 years or so. At a certain point, I just said, you know what, I work really hard. I mean, I'm a hard worker. So I thought, well, maybe I ought to start my own business and pour all that energy into something that I own. I also felt like, I was getting a little stale at the bank. There was always more to learn, but I wanted to be afraid. I actually wanted to be kind of in a situation where I was a little more challenged, a little more afraid of something. Like, it was just very cozy at the bank. I could have kept staying there. I could have kept probably increasing my salary and so forth, but I felt it wasn't a big enough challenge. So I was very deliberate in the way I went about starting the company. And one of the things, my parents were always very much into therapy, going to a therapist just to talk about life, talk about things going on. So I was talking to a therapist back then. He prepared me for this big change in my life, which was basically me in my apartment with no clients, and great, I have a company, but there's no one asking for my services yet, right? So that's a huge change from going to work every day. So prior to starting the company, I spent about 6 months.
This is an amazing story, by the way. This is quite an insight to Joshua's background and how he started the business, and this is quite unique. It is kind of jumping into Joshua's mind and understanding a little bit of what drives him and what got him to where he is today. And I think this is quite significant also for some of the messages that are coming back to the keynote later, which is this focus on being adaptable. And he will describe it much better than I can, but being adaptable, being able to play with the punches, I guess that's the term or the expression. But let's continue.
Focusing on the mental aspect of being prepared to be uncomfortable, or as it's often said, being comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Because I knew I was entering a period where I would probably be uncomfortable. There's a lot of uncertainty in starting a business, and you have to go into it knowing that it's uncertain, knowing that that's okay, and that you're going to be uncomfortable for a period of time. So that was the beginnings of it. At the time, Industrial Light and Magic was doing incredible new things in the movies, all these special effects you'd see in movies. And it was just like, I fell in love with the name, right? Industrial Light and Magic. I just thought, what a cool name for a company. And then one day I think I was in the bathtub. I got a lot of ideas in the shower or the bathtub or whatever. And it was like, Industrial Logic, that could be a good name. So thought up the name. And the idea at the time was like, how can we bring the light and magic of software development to more and more people, right? The things that really work well. So that's about what I had in mind for the business, and no business plan. I am not a business major. I'm a liberal arts major, but I did start programming at a very young age, and I'm a second generation software person. So I got into it, as a 10-year-old. And was programming in middle school and programming in high school, and I made a little money in high school programming, that kind of thing. So I had a fair amount of experience, but I had a heck of a lot more to learn. and I knew nothing about business. So for me, a big part of it was, what are some books I could study to like actually learn how to run a successful business? So I was ravenous in terms of finding excellent books to help guide me through the fog of uncertainty that happens when you start a business.
And of course, one of the aspects that is critical for us to survive in any business endeavor, whether it's starting a business or whether it's the middle of a large project in a business or a downturn or whatever, or starting a new product, there's always that uncertainty. And one of the things that you talk about in the book, which I think is brilliant, and the story you chose to talk about it is, I think, very inspiring, is this idea that all of the difficulties can turn into opportunities, right? You have this story about Sir Richard Branson. By the way, that's the title of Sir was earned through, I would say, a dramatic show of agility over his business life. And the story you share with us in the book is also one of those. So he was stranded in an airport, and then something happened that helped him turn that challenge into an opportunity. Tell us that story.
Yeah, sure. This is one of many stories in the book. My book, Joy of Agility, is all stories. It's over 100 stories, and they all exist to help illustrate aspects of agility. So the story of Richard Branson is in a section of the book. It's associated with
one of the cool things about the book that Joshua is writing and will be publishing in 2023, I believe early 2023. He will share that later in the keynote. Is exactly this collection of stories that helps illustrate what many of us are trying to achieve with our daily work. So definitely a great book to check out.
6 mantras. That mantra is called "Be readily resourceful." So being resourceful means you're finding quick and clever ways to get around challenges. And being readily resourceful means you do it easily. It comes to you very naturally and quickly, being readily resourceful. Richard Branson was with his girlfriend in the British Virgin Islands in the late 1970s. They went to the airport for a one-way flight to Puerto Rico. All the passengers were waiting for the airplane to arrive, and suddenly there was a message over the announcement system saying that the plane was not coming, and there was no real explanation as to why, but it was completely delayed. So just the flight is delayed and no other information. Clear blue skies, really nice day. It wasn't a weather-related issue. What do you do? What do you do in that situation, right?
Yeah, you're basically stranded, right? Like you can't do anything. You don't own the planes yet.
Exactly. You're stuck, you're stranded. You start to think about, well, what should we do? Should we leave the airport and then come back later? And what do if you miss the flight? Or should we just go to the bar? Should we go eat a bunch of food? Like, what do you do? Very, very, very few people do what Richard Branson did. And what he did was he called a charter airline and he asked them, what would it cost to fly from the British Virgin Islands to Puerto Rico? Figured out that each seat would cost about $39 US. And he found some piece of cardboard in the airport, scrawled on it, $39 one-way flight to Puerto Rico, and walked around the airport to all the other passengers going there and basically sold every seat. And they flew uneventfully on the chartered flight to Puerto Rico. And he talks about this as the kind of the early birth of what would become Virgin Atlantic and the various Virgin Airways that he's created over the years. So I thought just, how empowered was he to do that, right? He wasn't letting himself just be stuck. He was getting around an obstacle, and there's a joy in that, right? And the book is called Joy of Agility because it really is about getting unstuck and finding ways around difficult problems, solving problems, succeeding sooner. Anyway, it's one of many stories, and it's a wonderful story.
Yeah, absolutely. The book is filled with these stories, as Josh said. One of the things that comes to mind immediately is that this is also a great story to illustrate how, if you do it often enough, being uncomfortable is the natural way of being, right? Like in this case, Sir Richard Branson did not necessarily think, oh my God, I'm totally lost, I'm abandoned, the airline doesn't care about me. He started thinking, okay, what can I do? And of course, many things can happen, but he probably is a very goal-oriented person, judging from his career. So he figured out, how do I get to my goal, right? And it can't be very comfortable to go around an airport with a handwritten cardboard saying, hey, do you want to fly to Puerto Rico, 39 US, one-way ticket right here, right?
Right. It was just a brilliant moment, and it speaks a lot to that notion that you're not stuck, that you're not subject to conditions as they are, that you can find ways around them. And I think that's a big part of business, right? It's basically, you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to find situations where your customers aren't happy or your teams aren't performing the way you like to. And the joy of agility is finding ways through that.
And that's a great point, and one that is worth highlighting. The joy of agility is finding ways through the obstacles and the challenges that we face in our lives and in our careers. The example that Joshua chose to use here, the Richard Branson story, is a great example, because it talks about a difficult moment, and it talks about how we need to overcome. But because we need to overcome those difficult moments, we actually have to find the strength, the power, the motivation, and of course the tricks, the tips, the tools, the techniques, as I very often say on the podcast, to go there, right? Like, and that is the joy of agility, as Joshua puts it. And for me, that it's also one of the key things about wanting to be a Scrum Master and being a Scrum Master is never to get stuck in what is, but always be able to bring in energy to motivate the team and to find out what could be, right? Like the change that could be, the success that could be, and very often that means fighting some established prejudices. I mean, I'm very familiar with that in the discussion about no estimates, where we try to establish practice of managing projects without estimation. And for me to be able to find that, the whole no estimates approach that I talk about in the no estimates book and elsewhere, it was about facing challenges, facing the difficulties, and then from then on moving, right? Like not being stuck there, not trying to just get better at something that would never work, but rather to move on and to become better. All right, let's continue watching.
Through that fog, finding ways to your destination, which make life better, bring joy to people, and all that. That's to me what it's about.
I really like the title, because many of the Scrum Masters that I interview on the podcast, they find the role a little bit as if by accident. But many of them, not all, but most of them, they consider it almost a calling, right? And I'm reminded the fact that many entrepreneurs and business owners, just like yourself, also get to that point, and they kind of realize that, look, this going to a job 9 to 5 is not for me, right? Like, there's also this aspect of a vocation, of a calling, right? And why I put these two together is that, for me, I've learned a lot from working with entrepreneurs and business owners. I would say that I've learned from those interactions a lot more than I've learned from any agile training or course that I've attended. Why do you think it's so natural for the entrepreneurs out there, the business owners out there, to naturally adopt agility, sometimes without even calling it that, right? Like they don't necessarily think in those terms.
I mean, if you don't adapt to your situation as an entrepreneur, if you don't find solutions to problems, you will be out of business very soon, and you'll be working for someone else. So the very nature of being a successful entrepreneur means getting around difficult problems, finding solutions, and being incredibly adaptable and resourceful. and also quick. It can't take you forever to come up with a solution. Your competitors will eat your lunch, right? So being quick, resourceful, and adaptable, which is one of the definitions of agile in the dictionary, that's what it means to be a good entrepreneur. You know, you have to be those things. It's not the only thing you have to be, right? I mean, ideally, you're not evil and you're not taking advantage of people and all those awful things. So there's more to it. But if you really do look at successful entrepreneurs, you'll see primarily they're quick, resourceful, and adaptable.
And of course, one of the things for us as Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, and of course team members, product owners, is to understand what that means in practice. And you go through those 6 mantras in the book. You share what they mean in which I think is brilliant, in an illustrative way with those stories. But walk us through those 6 and just tell us shortly, what do you think is the most important message that the Scrum Master should get from there? And of course, they can then read the book and get all the stories.
By the way, these 6, I didn't write a table of contents before writing the book and saying, I'm going to teach people 6 mantras. That's not how it played out. What I did was I started writing stories that I felt were very, very exemplary.
The idea of the 6 mantras is, I think, brilliant. Of course, it's kind of a synthesis. It's kind of bringing many lessons together under one heading. But mantras also refer to the idea that we don't always understand how to apply the learning that we have achieved or that we got during our career. But if we keep on thinking about it, we will find, right? Like when we talk about a mantra, like for example, the mantra I put on the chat, be comfortable being uncomfortable. You may not know what that means in general. It's too generic for that. But once you start thinking about it, you can learn to apply it in the context where you are. And mantras in that respect are a little bit like values or principles. They kind of generate a way of thinking, right? So it's really cool that Joshua created these 6 mantras, and we'll actually go through some of those in this keynote. So let's listen.
Of agility or aspects of agility. Gradually, I had a pile of stories, and I'm like, well, I can't publish a pile of stories. They got to be sort of organized into parts of the book. What are those parts? What is each story kind of telling? And so gradually over many, many months, the mantras kind of emerged. And I would not say that they're all my mantras, right? Some of these are phrases or mantras that others have used. So they're also very highly coupled to the definition of agility itself, right? So having a quick, resourceful, and adaptable character is one of the definitions, or being quick, easy, and graceful, right? Having an ability to move with quick, easy grace. That's another aspect or definition of agility. So these mantras are very coupled to those words. Okay, so I tell the story about these mantras through stories. So let's tell one quick story here about. I almost want to call him Sir, but he we're not in the United Kingdom or anything like that. But John Wooden, who passed away several years ago, is considered the best basketball coach of all time. He was a Hall of Fame basketball player and a Hall of Fame coach. And what he did with his teams, and he was a coach at UCLA, right in Southern California there, the UCLA Bruins. He did things no one's ever done. Took his teams to 12 championships over a short period of time, and he just kept creating championship team after championship team. How did he do it? There's all these books that he's co-written, that others have written about him. One of his primary mantras, if not his number one mantra, was be quick, but don't hurry. Now, what he meant by that was that when you hurry, you make mistakes. Now, let's just think about basketball. I don't really play basketball. You don't need to play it either. You might not even care because it's an American sport. It doesn't matter. It's a sport, okay? And what he found was that people that hurried made mistakes which led to losses, right? Like mistakes could be costly. There are some mistakes that aren't a big deal, but there are mistakes that, turnovers in a game when the other team gets the ball, things like that. So what he had to do was train his players to be balanced, to be consistent, really consistent, to play under control. So he would call it quickness under control. And I think all of us can relate to this, right?
I'm reminded of the idea of speed from lean. In lean, there's always this idea that you should be quick, but you should not hurry. You should not be hasty, right? And I think that what Joshua is referring to here, which is important for our teams as well, right? Like we want our teams to be quick, but not to hurry. And how often do we see in reality that our teams are pushed to hurry? They are forced to hurry. I mean, we've heard these phrases before, like cutting corners, quick and dirty, whatever that is. So it's all about hurrying to the end line rather than being quick as a natural way of the way we work, right? And as Scrum Masters, I think this particular mantra has huge applications as well in our work, not just for John Wooden in basketball, but also for Scrum Masters working with the teams. Like, we need to help our teams to be quick under control, to be quick but not to hurry. I think that's a brilliant mantra, which kind of illustrates how important these mantras can be, the ones we like, the ones we feel more attached to, in reminding us of what really matters when it comes to helping our teams.
Awry. And then we also know when things were quick, and that was a joyful experience. Whether it's experiencing a service that is just like quick, easy, graceful, wow, that was an awesome service, right? Versus something where it was hurried and like they microwaved your food, but it wasn't quite done. They gave it to you and it's got frozen in the middle, and it's like someone hurried this out to me, and this isn't quick. This is hurrying, right? So the difference between being quick and hurrying is critical. It's critical to the players on John Wooden's teams. And it is not just a sports thing, right? I mean, it relates to just about anything we do. So if you think about your job every day and think about, am I being quick right now or am I hurrying? Right? What John Wooden would have to do sometimes is slow down the freshman players. These would be freshmen coming right out of high school. They were star players in high school, but they hurried. He'd have to slow them down, get them to learn quickness under control, understand that you cannot do something when you're off balance. We're going to get to balance soon because it's also part of another mantra, but be quick but don't hurry is one of these mantras now that every day I think about. Every single day I think about, am I being quick right now or am I hurrying? And I try not to hurry. I try to slow myself down at times and go, let's have quickness under control here. So that's all. You could spend your lifetime working to perfect that mantra, just that one alone.
I think I like very much the word mantra also because it reflects exactly that. This idea that these are things to have in mind, to consider, to think through, but it's not something you can attain, right? Like it's this constant search for perfection, which is also kind of one of the core aspects of not just agility, but also the lean movement, which is this idea of continuous improvement, right? And by the way, the lean movement also have, or at least the people in the early days of the lean movement had a saying very close to this: "Be quick, but don't hurry," which is be more like the tortoise, not the hare. And the idea is that it's by doing things slowly in a certain way that things get done quickly, right? Like it's not by just running forward, but rather the improvement over time that gets to that quote unquote perfection, right? And of course, at some point, it's just good enough. We don't need to make it any more perfect. And then, as it usually happens, we find another bottleneck and we improve there. And that's actually one of the core aspects of lean as well.
Yeah. Like I see teams right now in one of our clients, they're hurrying to get something out the door by summertime, right? A release of their product by summertime. And they actually are not well aligned. They need to be better aligned. They need to slow down and charter, do what we call chartering. So maybe for others, it would be just filling out a bunch of product or, kind of strategy canvases. Whatever you want to call it, it's getting alignment within the community of what are we trying to achieve, what are we not trying to achieve, what is success going to look like. Slowing down to do that is something that doesn't come naturally to a lot of teams that are under pressure to deliver. They just want to hurry up and do everything they can to deliver. And in fact, that is hurrying.
And that's a very important point now. The way we normally ask teams to get something done quickly is to hurry. It's to do things sometimes out of control, sometimes in control, but cutting corners as an example. And I remember one phrase or a story that I believe it was Craig Larman who told me. We were in a session and Craig started talking about this magic toolbox of developers, right? Like they have this magic toolbox on the side, and when they are asked to deliver something quickly, they start taking this magic tools out of it, like skip code reviews, skip testing, skip unit tests, right? Like all of this is kind of an illustration of the fact that when we ask teams to be quick, we are very often implicitly and sometimes even explicitly asking them to hurry. So this discussion by Joshua is actually incredibly powerful for us to come back and think, okay, so how can I help the teams be more like tortoises? If you look at the quote I just put in the chat, you'll see the quote from Taishi Ono, where he says that the Toyota production system can only be achieved if all the workers become like tortoises, right? So doing something in control, but the whole system is quick, right? And I think we need to start thinking about that as Scrum Masters. Like, how can we make this happen in our teams, that everybody is in control and doing things that to the untrained eye may look slow, but at the end deliver very fast and very quick results.
And it can lead to some bigger problems down the road. So slow down, get aligned, understand how you want to work together. It can feel deadly slow. And yet it can help you accelerate, because it really helps you understand exactly what you're going for and what you're not going for, and how you want to work together so you don't step on each other's toes, all those wonderful things like working agreements and stuff like that. I call it chartering. I learned it from a friend years ago, and to me, it's exactly that. It's one of those practices that seems like it slows you down, when in fact it accelerates you.
So what are some of the other mantras, Josh?
Okay, so we kind of touched on one earlier with Richard Branson's story, but be readily resourceful. So that's where you're basically, in some ways it's your mental mindset, your approach to sort of how do you deal with a problem. You could feel stuck. Nothing I can do. I'm stuck. And I think for Scrum Masters, right, you may feel that way sometimes working with certain individuals, right? How do you get through to them? Like they just aren't listening to you. They don't care about what you're saying. One of my colleagues, Wyatt Sutherland, he recently was coaching a coach within Industrial Logic. And he asked that coach, who was having some difficulty with a client, he said, have you kind of had a social hour with this person? And that actually is a social hour over Zoom, because it's, still pandemic times. And it turned out they hadn't done any kind of personal connection stuff, but there was just a lot of friction between these two, our coach and this one individual on a team. Well, they ended up having a wonderful social hour together. They learned that they both are like guitar, huge guitar aficionados, talked all about guitars, all about this. And, what do you think happened, right? Thereafter, the relationship got better. They could hear each other better, and progress started to get made. So he wasn't stuck as a coach, and another coach helped him see a way forward. Right? There's no problem in getting coaching help. A lot of Atul Gawande, who wrote the Checklist Manifesto and many other books.
By the way, that's an important aspect. It's not related directly to the keynote, But what Joshua said is really, really important. Asking for help from other coaches and being coached is one of the best ways for us to learn how to coach our teams, right? Like I usually say that you can't coach if you haven't been coached yourself. So that's a really good point. It's not straight or directly related to the keynote, but definitely something to keep in mind. Are you being coached? And if not, how can you coach other teams? Because you haven't yet been on the other side. You don't know how it feels. You don't know what things work, what things don't work unless you've experienced it yourself. So keep that in mind.
He's a world-class surgeon. He himself got himself a coach at a certain point to say, how could I be even better? And he approached one of his professors from way back and said, could you be my coach? And that professor ended up watching him in the surgical theater, performing actual surgeries and giving him a few little tips, which in fact helped his clients have fewer side effects after after surgery. So anyone can become readily resourceful if they have this mindset of, I can find a way around a problem. I can get help. I can be empowered like Richard Branson was. I can just have this approach that there is a way and I'm going to find it. That's be readily resourceful. Another one? You want another mantra?
Let's do another one, and then I want you to focus on the call to action that you want to give Scrum Masters.
Okay, great. Okay, so another one which is associated with that be quick but don't hurry is be balanced and graceful. So this one really changed its name a lot, this mantra. Okay, so in Lean, there's a lot of talk about respect for people, which of course is a wonderful thing. And basically, when we say be graceful, that is respect for people. You be graceful with people, be graceful with your customer, be graceful with your colleagues, your managers, the people below you, be graceful with everyone. The part about balance is important. Okay, so for Scrum Masters here, think about when things are imbalanced. Think about when you are not balanced, right? Something can happen and you feel off balance. You don't feel like you've come to work where everything's okay and you're going to be at the top of your form, right? Something happened, maybe you didn't regain your equilibrium, and therefore you're not at the top of your game. Right? If you're John Wooden, the UCLA coach of these championship teams, he would basically blow his whistle anytime a player was off balance, either on offense or defense. Now, a lot of software teams, for example, are imbalanced when it comes to dealing with quality issues, right? The quality problems are mounting and they're just producing the next feature after the next feature after the next feature. There's a tremendous imbalance there, right? So how do so if you have this mantra, be balanced and graceful, hopefully that guides your decisions, right? That guides your decisions about how can we have a better balance so that we're more adaptable for the future.
I'm thinking it can serve also as a great reflection cue, right? Because I can look at my team, I can see the conversations they're having, I can think of the sprint planning we just had or the retro we just had, and I can think, okay, did they feel balanced? Did it feel like they were building on each other rather than pushing against each other to kind of gain space, maybe even, and find individual balance over team balance? Like I can ask these questions and think from the observations that I make, how can I then help the team regain balance?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we see this so much in the corporate world, especially where a few people dominate the discussion and others are just completely silent. They're not having that chance to speak their mind. You're not getting the benefit of their ideas. It's not a balanced meeting. It's not a balanced, power. There's a power imbalance, if you will. And so as Scrum Masters, you can look for that and try to use clever facilitation techniques or whatever it is to create a better balance, right? better balance tends to lead to, so going back to John Wooden, he said, you cannot be quick if you're off balance. Quickness under control requires being in balance. So, when NASA sends astronauts up to space, they've spent an enormous amount of time practicing for what could go wrong, right? The balance of what are we going to do in space versus what.
This is a super important statement. I know it's kind of referred to in passing, but think about this for a second. When NASA sends people up to space, they spend enormous amount of time training for when things go wrong. And this is very important. Like, when was the last time you deliberately practiced as a team for when things go wrong? I mean, it could be a live systems availability issue, could be a bug, could be a security breach. These days they are quite important, and we should definitely be ready for those. That's an incredibly important aspect of our work that very often gets forgotten in the rush to add new features. So it's really something that is very important for us to think about. What do we need to practice for when things go wrong? What are the things that we need to be ready to recover from?
What are we going to do if something doesn't go right in space, right? What can go right, but what can go wrong, and have the right balance between those two. Resiliency. A lot of people talk about resilience engineering these days. You will not be resilient if you don't pay attention to imbalances, right? And how can we make sure that we're prepared for change? So all of this stuff ties deeply into another mantra called be poised to adapt. And we don't have time to get into every one of these mantras, but they're very intertwined, and they really do, I think, point the way towards the kind of daily reflection, as you said, Vasco. That reflection: are we in balance? Are we being graceful with each other? Are we being quick, or are we hurrying, and so on? That kind of daily reflection, I think, to me, that leads to true agility.
Absolutely. And Josh, if people want to know more about the book, maybe even read parts of it, if some are already available, where can they go?
So they can go to, if you type in Joy of Agility to Google, you'll probably find it. We're working on the website, and there'll be a joyofagility.com or .org website. For now, it's on Industrial Logic's website, and there's, under resources, you can just find Joy of Agility there. Resources is a menu item, not people. So that will help you find some of the free resources we have available, like canvases and various other cheat sheets and things like that. But there's a link to the Joy of Agility book page.
Absolutely. We'll put the link in the notes below the video, so you can easily go and check it out. Now, for the last thing, I wanted you to think about, you've obviously have a lot of experience running your own business as well as developing software and making it happen in a very practical sense. Some of the viewers might not know, but you actually wrote a book about programming, Refactoring to Patterns, which is a reference book for many of us that are old enough to have been contemporaneous with the book. And therefore, you have all of that experience collected, and you write about that in the book, of course. But the question I have for you is, what's your call to action to Scrum Masters? What's the thing you want Scrum Masters to do differently after they've read the book?
I mean, what I really would love is for more and more people to free themselves from the frameworks. I think that the frameworks, you may really believe, since you've been maybe doing it for years, that the way forward for any new team you work with is to do sprints, to do stand-up meetings, to do all of the rituals you've been doing for years and years and years. And what I would encourage you to do is what I've done myself, right? I'm not asking you to do anything that I haven't done, which is to experiment with other ways, to look at all kinds of other approaches and try them for real, not for a day, not even a week, but try them for months, and see if you can find better and better ways to be more agile, less friction, less confusion. There were times, 7 years we spent teaching story points until we finally woke up and said, you know, it's not that we're bad teachers, because we basically, I think we're pretty good. We work really hard on our training. It's just that the idea itself is kind of like it throws too many people into a state of confusion from which it's pretty hard to rescue them. We had one client call a story point a nut, a nebulous unit of time. And we were using them for 7 years until we said, let's try something different. So to me, I think agility is not formulaic. I think it's different in every context. The mantras, I think, are kind of evergreen. They will not go stale. But the rituals that you're doing today may actually be outdated. One of the reasons I started calling it modern agile was, I think agility is evergreen, but I was tired of what I was seeing as old-fashioned agile software stuff, things that we were doing in the 90s and in the early 2000s that many of the early practitioners abandoned in favor of simpler, safer, more streamlined approaches. So to me, the call to action is always for Scrum Masters, open your mind to trying something different. Try Kanban, try lean concepts, dive into lean, learn all about that. Read my books. My book is filled with practical advice about true agility. Find the early pioneers, see what they're doing today, because I guarantee you it's very different from what they were doing. Yes, the Scrum Guide keeps being updated. I still think that you can try all kinds of different approaches. And here's one last thing. Like you said earlier, Vasco, about learning from entrepreneurs and how entrepreneurs tend to be more agile than many sort of agile consultants. I've learned more about agility from John Wooden, a basketball coach, from Paul O'Neill, who was the leader of Alcoa, for many years and used safety to create a doorway to excellence, from Amy Edmondson, the leader of the psychological safety movement, from Richard Branson's examples, right? And there are a few in the book, not just one, and many other entrepreneurs. I've learned a lot about agility from non-agile people, right? So
this is definitely something that might be a little bit controversial in our community. But the message that I think Joshua is putting forward is that there's a lot of examples out there of people being agile in their lives, in their business. And we can, of course, as Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, learn a lot from those people, learn from what they have been able to achieve. So perhaps one interpretation of this call to action, if I can make it that, is to look at people that are succeeding in their fields of expertise and ask yourself, what can I learn from this person? What can I learn from what they have done? And the question that Joshua asked, look at what the Agile pioneers are doing today and see how much they've changed, how they have evolved and are doing different things today. So it's definitely a great call to action to consider people in other areas of life and how they express agility in their own way.
Get out of your industry and go study, exemplary people from other industries to learn how they were agile, right? Gary Vaynerchuk in the marketing field or business, entrepreneurial field, incredibly successful. I view him as one of the most agile people I know. There's a lot of agility out there, and it doesn't go by the name agile.
Absolutely. And of course, I would like to reinforce that by reminding everybody that the theme of this summit is Lead the Change. And we can't be really leading the change if we're not trying out new things. Josh, one last question. If there's a resource, something specific, could be a book, a blog, a podcast, an article, whatever that might be, that you could recommend for us who want to dive deeper into this understanding of agility, into the core message of the book that you're writing, what would that be?
I mean, I it'll sound self-serving, but I wrote this book. I poured my all of my energy for the last 4 years into writing this thing. I literally would like this book to be the definitive guide to agility. That may sound pretentious and all that, but I've literally been involved in this movement for over 20 years. I want you to join our community. We are going to bring agility to every human endeavor. That's my goal. I'm not in just doing software anymore. I think agility is something that can help many of us in all kinds of endeavors. So if you want to learn more about these mantras and kind of learn how to practice them more, join our community. There is a email list that you can follow if you look at the resources that Vasco will provide. It's hard for me to just give one specific book or article. I would have you be reading lots of different things, lots of different books, and looking at lots of different people. So this is a journey, right? Becoming agile is just not something that happens overnight. It's really a journey, and it takes dedication and practice. But I think the result is really that joy that comes, right? I think, why do we lead the change? The theme of your conference, lead the change. Ultimately, we're changing to produce better outcomes, right? Better outcomes, and usually better outcomes give us greater joy. So to me, Rich Sheridan wrote, Joy Inc. and Chief Joy Officer. Those are also wonderful resources to look for, books that point the way towards greater joy in the workplace, which can lead to greater outcomes. So,
absolutely, and lots of references are in the book already. The Joy of Agility, or Joy of Agility, is the title. And thank you for leaving us with one more, Joy Inc. by Rich Sheridan. Definitely a great book for people to go out and study what Agile might look like when it's not called Agile.
Right. Yes.
Josh, it's been a pleasure. We'll put the link to, of course, the book, Industrial Logic, and your own personal LinkedIn page in the notes below, so check it out. For now, thank you for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you, Vasco. Thank you to the Scrum Masters who are listening in, and I wish you well.
And that was it. That was the keynote with Joshua Kerievsky. The video for that keynote will be live later on today in the YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe, like, and click the bell so that you get notified when that video goes live. But there are other things you can watch in the Scrum Master Summit. There will be a keynote by Chris Malls talking about complexity, social complexity in the context of conflict and negotiation at work. Jason Little will be talking about lean change. Bob Galen will be talking about becoming an agile coach. Jerry Starsia is going to talk about business again, plan to pivot. So make sure you check that out if you like Joshua's keynote, because that's one more about business and business agility. Mark Kilby will be talking about hybrid work with Yves Hanul. Cliff Hazel and Martin von Weissenberry, the track host for the Scaling Agile track, will be talking about beyond copy and paste agile. Cliff, by the way, used to be at Spotify when they were developing their scaling model. Anu Gopal will be talking about the state of agile in Africa. Chris Williams brings back the business perspective with value backlogs, not story backlogs. And Heidi Helfand is gonna, in my opinion, host one of the most important keynotes of the summit with dynamic reteaming. So make sure that you listen to all of those keynotes, share your learnings. Join us at scrummastersummit.org and sign up to join our Slack channel, and of course share your questions, your thoughts, either here on the live sessions we will be having throughout the week, or also later on in the as you log in and you watch the videos on YouTube. Leave the questions there, or if you have a VIP ticket, you can go to the VIP website. The link will be in the scrummastersummit.org page on the top right. You log in, and as you watch, you can also leave us questions there. That was the first live stream of today. There will be more, so stay tuned, and I'll see you in the conference corridors. So don't hesitate to come up to me and tap me on the shoulder and let's have a chat. You can do that on Slack. So just sign up at scrummastersummit.org and you will get the Slack invite. See you, everybody. I'll see you later today and tomorrow.